A 73-year-old woman named Eleanor Hartman walked onto the Family Feud stage on November 2, 2023, carrying a DNA test result folded in her coat pocket and a photograph of 3 identical newborns taken in 1950. When Steve Harvey asked during the pre-show interview if she had any siblings, Eleanor said no, she was an only child, raised by a single mother in Pittsburgh who died in 1998 without ever telling her the truth. What Eleanor didn't say, what the producers didn't know until 20 minutes before taping, was that 2 other women were sitting in that audience: Helen Vasquez from Santa Fe and Margaret O'Brien from Boston, both 73 years old, both carrying the same DNA test results, both holding copies of the same photograph showing 3 identical babies in a hospital nursery with a handwritten note on the back that said, Baby A, Baby B, Baby C. August 14, 1950, St. Vincent's Hospital, Philadelphia. Steve had hosted 2,847 Family Feud episodes over 15 years and never once stopped a taping before the game started. He stopped this one because standing on his stage were 3 women who'd lived 73 years in 3 different cities, raised by 3 different families, believing they were only children, and who'd discovered 6 months ago, through a genealogy website, that they were triplets, separated at birth, and adopted through a closed program that destroyed all records in 1952. Steve looked at Eleanor, then at Helen in the audience, then at Margaret, sitting 3 seats away from Helen, and his legs gave out. Not dramatically, just buckled. He caught himself on the podium, held it with both hands, and said 4 words that made every person in that studio understand they weren't about to watch a game show. This can't be real. November 2nd, 2023. Stage 2 at the Family Feud Studios in Atlanta. The Hartman family from Pittsburgh stood opposite the Chen family from Portland, both teams in matching colors. The Hartmans in burgundy, the Chens in navy. Eleanor was the oldest contestant in Family Feud history at 73. Retired nurse, white hair cut short, hands that shook slightly from early-stage Parkinson's. Her daughter Rebecca, her son-in-law Tom, her 2 grandchildren, all standing under lights that made the stage feel smaller than it was. During soundcheck, a production assistant noticed 2 women in the audience holding the same photograph Eleanor had shown during her application interview. The PA asked if they knew each other. The women said no. The PA asked why they had the same photo. Helen said, "Because we're sisters. We think. We're here to find out." The PA went pale, ran to find the producer. The producer called Steve's dressing room. Steve came to the stage 15 minutes early, saw the 3 women standing in different sections of the studio, saw their faces, identical bone structure, same blue eyes, same way of tilting their heads when they listened, and had to sit down. But nobody in that studio knew what was about to happen. The system that separated Eleanor, Helen, and Margaret wasn't failing. It was designed to do exactly what it did. In 1950, St. Vincent's Hospital in Philadelphia ran an adoption program funded by wealthy benefactors who believed poor women couldn't raise multiple children, and that separating siblings gave each child a better chance at a good home. The program targeted unwed mothers, immigrants, women without resources. When triplets were born, the program split them. Different families, different cities, different lives. Records were sealed. Birth certificates were falsified to show adoptive parents as biological parents. In 1952, the hospital burned the original files in what they called a records purge, but what adoption advocates later called evidence destruction. By 1955, 847 children had been separated from siblings they'd never know existed. The program shut down in 1956 after a local journalist exposed the coercion tactics. But the damage was permanent. No database, no way to reconnect. Just scattered children growing up as only children, carrying a loneliness they couldn't name because they didn't know what was missing. Eleanor Hartman grew up in Pittsburgh, raised by Martha and Robert Hartman, good people who told her she was adopted when she turned 8 and said her birth mother was very young and wanted Eleanor to have opportunities she couldn't provide. Eleanor never asked questions, didn't want to seem ungrateful. The Hartmans loved her, sent her to nursing school, walked her down the aisle when she married at 22. But Eleanor felt it her whole life, this gap, this sense that something was wrong but she couldn't identify what. She'd dream about people who looked like her, wake up feeling like she'd lost something, tell herself it was normal. Everyone feels incomplete sometimes. This wasn't special or significant. She had a daughter, became a grandmother, retired after 40 years as a nurse, and still felt it, the gap. Helen Vasquez grew up in Santa Fe, raised by Maria and Carlos Vasquez, immigrants from Mexico who adopted her through a Catholic charity they trusted, because the priest said God had chosen this child for them. Helen knew she was adopted, knew her birth mother was white and couldn't keep her, never knew why a white baby ended up with a Mexican family in New Mexico, but never questioned it either because the Vasquezes loved her completely. Helen became a teacher, married at 25, had 2 sons, divorced at 40, raised her kids alone, felt the gap her whole life too, the sense that somewhere, something was missing. She'd see her reflection and think, that's not right, something's off, but couldn't explain what. Told herself it was insecurity, vanity, the normal dissatisfaction people feel with their own faces. But it wasn't normal. It was cellular, a body knowing it had a twin, a triplet, an identical somewhere else walking around with the same DNA and different memories. Margaret O'Brien grew up in Boston, raised by Patricia and William O'Brien, Irish Catholics who adopted through a program their church recommended. Margaret was told she was adopted at age 12 during a fight when she screamed, "You're not my real parents!" And her mother slapped her and said, "No, we're not, but we're the ones who stayed." The truth delivered in anger. Margaret never brought it up again, but she thought about it constantly. Who was her real mother? Why did she give her up? Was she alone in the world, or were there others? The questions circled for decades. Margaret became a lawyer, never married, poured everything into her career. Felt the gap like a phantom limb, present, painful, impossible to explain to people who had siblings and took the concept of family for granted. In 2023, all 3 women took DNA tests. Different companies, different reasons. Eleanor's daughter gave her an ancestry kit for Christmas, said it would be fun to see her ethnic background. Helen's son gave her a 23andMe kit for her birthday. Thought she might find distant cousins. Margaret bought her own kit from MyHeritage during a sale. Figured at 73 she had a right to know where she came from, even if the answers came too late to matter. The tests came back within 2 weeks of each other. All 3 showed the same thing. You have close family matches. Eleanor clicked the link, saw 2 names. Helen Vasquez, predicted relationship, sibling, 49.8% DNA shared. Margaret O'Brien, predicted relationship, sibling, 49.7% DNA shared. Eleanor stared at the screen for 20 minutes, checked the results 5 times, thought it was a mistake. DNA tests weren't perfect. This had to be an error. Then she saw the birth year next to both names. 1950, same as hers, both born August 14th, same as her. Eleanor messaged Helen first. "I think we might be sisters. This seems impossible, but the DNA doesn't lie. Were you adopted?" Helen wrote back in 4 minutes. "Yes, Philadelphia, St. Vincent's Hospital. Were you?" Eleanor felt her heart stop. "Yes, same hospital." Helen sent the photograph. 3 babies. Eleanor had the same one. Her mother had given it to her before she died. Said the hospital gave it to her with the adoption papers. She didn't know who the other babies were. Eleanor messaged Margaret. Got the same response. Same hospital, same date, same photograph. And that wasn't even the part that made Steve cry. The 3 women scheduled a video call. November 1st, 2022. Exactly 1 year before the Family Feud taping. They sat in 3 different time zones, staring at each other through screens. And it was like looking in mirrors that showed alternate versions of the same life. Same face, same eyes, same gestures, the way they touched their throats when they got emotional, the way they tilted their heads when they listened. They talked for 4 hours, compared memories. Eleanor's mother had told her she was an only child. Helen's parents said the same. Margaret's too. None of them knew triplets existed. The hospital had erased them from each other's records. Created 3 only children from 1 set of triplets. For 72 years, they'd been walking around incomplete and calling it normal. They decided to meet in person. But before that, Eleanor had a Family Feud taping scheduled. She'd applied 6 months earlier, before she knew about Helen and Margaret, back when she thought she was just a 73-year-old grandmother who wanted to do something fun with her family before Parkinson's made it impossible. The show approved her in October. Eleanor called Helen and Margaret, asked if they wanted to come to the taping, sit in the audience, meet for the first time in person at a game show. It sounded ridiculous. All 3 agreed immediately. Because what else do you do when you've been searching for something your whole life and finally found it? You show up. Even if the venue is absurd, even if the setting makes no sense, you show up. Steve Harvey didn't know any of this until 20 minutes before taping. The producer pulled him aside, explained the situation, showed him the DNA results, the photographs, the messages between the 3 women. Steve read everything twice, looked at the producer. "They've never met in person?" The producer shook her head. "Never. Today is the first time they'll be in the same room." Steve closed his eyes. "We can't do this as a surprise reveal. That's exploitation. We do this right or we don't do it at all." Steve walked onto the stage, saw Eleanor standing with her family, saw Helen and Margaret in the audience, both crying already just from being in the same building. Steve walked to the audience barrier, extended his hand to Helen. "Ma'am, would you come up here, please?" Helen stood, walked to the stage. Steve helped her up, did the same with Margaret. The 3 women stood in a line, Eleanor in the middle, Helen on her left, Margaret on her right. They hadn't touched yet, hadn't hugged, just stood there staring at each other while 200 people watched in complete silence. The studio fell completely silent. Steve looked at the 3 of them, looked at the audience, looked at his crew. His voice came out quiet. "I've been hosting this show for 15 years. I've seen a lot of things, miracles, heartbreak, joy, but I have never seen this. These 3 women are 73 years old. They're triplets. They were separated at birth in 1950 and adopted by different families in different states. They didn't know each other existed until 1 year ago. They have never been in the same room together. Today is the first time in 73 years that they're standing next to each other. And I don't think we're playing a game show today. I think we're witnessing something that doesn't have a name." Eleanor reached for Helen's hand. Helen reached for Margaret's. They stood in a chain, Three women who shared DNA and nothing else. 73 years of separate lives converging into one moment on a stage that was supposed to be about guessing survey answers. Eleanor spoke first. Her voice shook. I thought I was alone my whole life. I thought the gap I felt was just me being broken. But I wasn't broken. I was just incomplete. Helen nodded. I used to have dreams about people who looked like me. I'd wake up and think I was going crazy. I wasn't crazy. I was remembering you. Both of you. Somehow. Margaret didn't speak, just cried. The kind of crying that comes from 73 years of wondering why you felt like half a person, and finally understanding it wasn't a metaphor, it was literal. You were 1/3 of a whole that got split apart before you were old enough to protest. Steve's legs buckled. He caught himself on the podium, held it with both hands. The audience gasped. Steve waved them off. I'm okay. His voice broke. Let me tell you something. 32 years ago, I made a promise to God that if He gave me a platform, I'd use it to help people. I thought that meant giving away money, paying medical bills, helping families in crisis. But this, he gestured at the three women. This is bigger than money. This is 3 lives that were stolen from each other getting returned. And I don't know what to do except stand here and thank God I get to witness it. But Steve wasn't done. He looked at Eleanor. How long have you known about them? 1 year. We found each other through DNA tests. And you've never met in person until right now? Never. We wanted to. But we also wanted it to be special. Not just coffee at a restaurant. Something we'd remember. Steve nodded, turned to the audience. Everyone in this room is about to be part of something these women will remember for the rest of their lives. We're not playing Family Feud today. We're giving 3 sisters the family reunion they were denied for 73 years. And if anyone has a problem with that, you can leave now. Nobody left. Steve turned to the producer. Clear the rest of the day. Cancel the other tapings. Reschedule them. Pay the families extra. Today belongs to Eleanor, Helen, and Margaret. The producer nodded. Steve looked at the 3 women. What do you want to do? We can turn the cameras off, give you privacy. Or we can document this. Let the world see what happens when a system tries to erase family, and family finds a way back anyway. Your choice. The 3 women looked at each other. Eleanor spoke. Keep them on. Maybe there are others out there who don't know they're not alone. Maybe seeing us will help them look. The cameras stayed on. For the next 2 hours, Eleanor, Helen, and Margaret sat on the Family Feud stage and told their stories. Not to Steve, to each other. Eleanor talked about growing up feeling like she was waiting for someone who never came. Helen talked about the dreams, the sense of incompleteness, the relationships that never worked because she was always searching for something she couldn't name. Margaret talked about the anger, at her birth mother for giving her up, at the system for lying, at the universe for making her feel crazy for 73 years, when the truth was, she'd been sane the whole time. Her body had known what her mind couldn't prove. They compared lives. Eleanor became a nurse. Helen became a teacher. Margaret became a lawyer. 3 careers built around helping people, fixing systems, fighting for others. They'd all married. Helen and Margaret divorced. Eleanor's husband died in 2015. They all had children, grandchildren, lives that were full and meaningful, and also incomplete, in a way none of them could explain until now. They looked alike, sounded alike, gestured alike, finished each other's sentences within 20 minutes of sitting together. 73 years apart, and their brains still synced like they'd been together the whole time. Steve sat on the stage floor and listened. Didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions, just bore witness. At one point, Eleanor said, "I'm angry we lost 73 years. Margaret said, "I'm grateful we found each other at all." Helen said, "Both things are true." Steve wrote that down on a piece of paper, showed it to the camera later. Both things are true. The clip would get 680 million views in 3 weeks. But Steve wasn't done. He pulled out his phone, called someone on speaker. A woman's voice answered. "Mr. Harvey? Dr. Patel, I need your help. I've got 3 women here, triplets separated at birth in 1950. They just met for the first time today. They're 73 years old. I need you to tell me if there are medical things they need to know about each other. Genetic stuff, family history, things that matter when you share DNA." Dr. Patel, a genetic counselor Steve had worked with on previous episodes, asked to speak to each woman. They spent 30 minutes on the phone comparing medical histories. Eleanor had Parkinson's. Helen had early-stage osteoporosis. Margaret had survived breast cancer 5 years ago. Dr. Patel explained that genetic conditions often run in families, that knowing each other's medical histories could save their lives, that Margaret's cancer meant Eleanor and Helen should get screened more frequently, that Eleanor's Parkinson's meant Helen and Margaret should watch for early symptoms. Information that would have been standard if they'd grown up together. Information that could change the trajectory of their remaining years. Steve hung up, looked at the 3 women. You just gave each other something the system tried to take away. Not just family. Information. The kind of information that keeps people alive. Eleanor started crying again. We have so little time left. I'm 73. I have Parkinson's. In 5 years I might not remember this day. Steve shook his head. Then we make sure you do. We document everything. We take pictures. We record conversations. We build a record of this reunion so complete that even if your memory goes, the proof stays. He turned to the crew. I want every camera angle. I want audio. I want everything. This is going in the archive. And I want copies made for each of them. High quality. So their families have it. So their grandchildren know what happened here. The crew nodded. Started filming with intention, not just coverage. Wide shots of the 3 women sitting together. Close-ups of their hands intertwined. Audio of their laughter when Helen told a story about her childhood, and Eleanor said, "That happened to me too," and they realized they'd lived parallel lives in different states. But Steve wasn't done. He looked at the audience. How many of y'all are adopted? 14 hands went up. How many of y'all ever wondered if you had siblings out there you didn't know about? All 14 hands stayed up. 3 more joined them. Steve pointed at each one. Take a DNA test. Today. Don't wait. Don't assume you're alone. These 3 women waited 73 years. They got lucky. They found each other. But they lost 7 decades. Don't lose yours. He addressed the cameras. Everyone watching at home, if you're adopted, if you've ever felt like something was missing, if you've ever had dreams about people who look like you, take the test. Search. The technology exists now. Use it. Don't die wondering. Die knowing. The audience applauded. The 3 women held each other. Steve sat on the floor next to them, and the image, 3 elderly white women and a 67-year-old black man sitting on a game show stage, crying about family and loss and systems that break people, became the most shared photo of 2023. The episode aired 3 weeks later. The clip went viral in 90 minutes. 680 million views in 3 weeks. Hashtag #FindYourTriplet trended worldwide for 19 days. DNA testing companies reported a 340% spike in orders. Adoption advocacy groups used the clip as evidence that closed adoptions cause lifelong harm. And critically, 127 people found siblings they didn't know existed. Brothers, sisters, twins, triplets. All because they saw Eleanor, Helen, and Margaret and thought, maybe I'm not alone either. Steve established the Hartman Triplets Reunion Fund 6 weeks after the taping. It pays for DNA tests, genealogy research, and reunion travel for adoptees searching for biological family. In the first year, the fund facilitated 412 reunions. Siblings who'd been separated at birth. Parents who'd been coerced into giving up children and spent 40 years looking for them. Adoptees who'd been told their birth parents were dead and discovered they were alive and searching too. Every reunion started the same way. Someone took a DNA test, found a match, and decided to stop wondering. Eleanor, Helen, and Margaret spent Thanksgiving 2023 together. Christmas too. They've seen each other every month since the taping. Eleanor's Parkinson's is progressing, but slowly. Helen's osteoporosis is managed. Margaret's cancer hasn't returned. They talk on the phone every Sunday. Video calls when they can. They've started writing a book together. 3 memoirs woven into one, showing how the same DNA expresses differently depending on environment, trauma, love, opportunity. The working title is 3 Lives, 1 Thread. 2 years later, they still watch the Family Feud clip, still cry, still marvel at the improbability of it all, that 3 women separated by design found each other by accident, that a game show became the site of their first meeting, that Steve Harvey gave them 2 hours of prime filming time to just exist as sisters for the first time in their lives. Helen said in an interview, "People ask if we're angry about the lost time. We are, but we're also grateful for the time we have left. Most people don't get second chances at family. We did. At 73. That's a miracle." Steve did an interview 9 months after the reunion. The host asked what made him stop the taping. Steve said, "Because some things are more important than entertainment." Those women had been incomplete for 73 years. 73 years of feeling broken, feeling crazy, feeling like something was wrong with them, when the thing that was wrong was the system that separated them. I couldn't look at them and think about buzzer points. I had to look at them and think about what it means to be human, to be family, to be stolen from each other and find your way back. That's not a game show moment, that's a life moment, and life moments deserve respect. The clip still circulates. Reaction channels break down every frame, the moment Steve's legs buckled, the moment the 3 women held hands, the moment Eleanor said, "I thought I was broken," and Helen said, "Me too," and Margaret said, "We weren't broken, we were just apart." The comments are hundreds of thousands deep, adoptees sharing their searches, people who found siblings, people still looking, people who gave up and are trying again because if 3 73-year-old women can find each other, maybe anyone can. There's a photo from that day that none of the viral clips show. It's from after the taping, in the parking lot. Eleanor, Helen, and Margaret standing next to Eleanor's rental car, arms around each other, crying and laughing at the same time. Rebecca, Eleanor's daughter, took it. She framed 3 copies, sent one to Helen, one to Margaret, kept one for herself. On the back of each, she wrote the same thing. November 2nd, 2023, the day Mom stopped being an only child. The photo sits on 3 mantles now: Pittsburgh, Santa Fe, Boston. 3 identical frames holding 3 identical photos of 3 identical women who lived 73 years apart, and decided the time they have left matters more than the time they lost. Some things the system breaks can't be fixed. But some things, like DNA, like cellular memory, like the specific way triplets tilt their heads when they listen, survive separation and find their way home anyway. If this story reminded you that the family you were separated from might be one DNA test away, and that it's never too late to stop being alone, share it with someone who's spent their whole life feeling incomplete and deserves to know why.